It is midday at Metu Kingdom. Individuals clustered in groups and discussed in whispers. Labake strolled past and greeted, but received a distasteful snarl. She walked some steps ahead, then stopped short to scrutinize her dress carefully. She extended her review to her shoes to ascertain that she was prim and proper. Everything seemed to be in order, she gestured to herself. So what could warrant the cold vibe she just received? She shrugged and hastened her pace to the Youth Corpers Lodge. At the front yard, she halted. It suddenly felt like a smoke screen. She swayed and pinched her nose to free her nostril of the choking breath that permeated the environment. She launched another step forward. Then it hit her. The usual rowdiness was absent, replaced with a graveyard silence that could amplify a pin drop. "Where is everyone?" she muttered softly. She looked ahead and caught a glimpse of peering eyes, flicked behind the curtain of the open window opposite her. The individual peeped with caution and motioned to her. The door was opened with care. Before her was Dejo. She walked into the dimly lit room, shaded from sunlight, which was traced to the relaxed window curve blinds. Dejo settled at the foot of the bed, visibly quivering. He grabbed a glass of water in full flinch and recoiled. He gulped non-stop until he emptied the contents. Labake stared hard at him, then broke the silence. "What is going on, Dejo? Where is everyone?" He buried his face in his palm. Then he looked up. His eyes were sunken in and bloodshot. Labake interrupted again and gave him another intense stare. "Dejo, talk to me. What is wrong? I'm getting scared though." Dejo sighed aloud, then narrated. "It was a bet. It was just meant to be a simple bet, and they took it further. Now we're in a big mess." "What do you mean?" "Do you recall when we arrived this town? We were taken round on a familiarization tour. We were also sensitized on the do's and don'ts of the community." "Yes, I remember." "Do you also recall a cottage that was pointed out to us, a stone throw from the king's palace, that has some resemblance with buildings from the colonial era?" "Yes, I do." We all commended the uniqueness and beauty of the structure. I remember we were warned that on no account should we enter the cottage, which is restricted to only indigenes of the town. The cottage was called the Unseen Eye. Thank you, Labake, for recounting in detail. I warned them severally, but they did not heed. He lowered his head and was silent again. "What happened, Dejo?" Labake prompted. "This suspense is killing." Dejo leaned forward and continued. "We were all returning from our city, chatting and having a good laugh about our various platoon projects. We walked past the cottage. For some strange reason, we were all mesmerized by its beauty afresh. Some ravishing yellow and red rose petals shaded the cottage, giving it a new appeal and an impression that one is in a foreign land. We decided to take some snapshots. After all, there's no harm in taking pictures. When we concluded the shots, Deji, the rich chap, flashed 50,000 naira before us. He dared whoever entered the cottage would receive the total sum. Our eyes lit up instantly. It's still a week to the next Alawi, and we were low on cash. All the same, I raised the alarm and reminded them of the stern warning that only indigents could enter the cottage. Deji discounted my warning, rather insisted that it was only a mere myth to ward off non-indigents. Half of our colleagues tilted to his side, while the other half were neutral. Recall that Kamson has always been a carefree daredevil kind of guy, so he stepped forward and took up the challenge. Despite my repeated pleas, he marched ahead, opened the gates, and walked into the cottage blindly. The next thing we heard was, "Wow, this is beautiful. You need to see this." He ran out and beckoned to us to come see mind-blowing treasures. We observed him for a moment to see if he would drop dead. On the contrary, nothing happened to him. Those that sided with Digi drung along into the cottage, while the rest of us treaded with caution. Dejo paused and held his breath with an agonizing terror. He stared at Labake. Labake, enveloped with unease, pushed further. So what happened? After 3 minutes, we heard heart-wrenching screams for help. Suddenly, the cottage exuded a piercing blaze, yet did not go in flames. Then the sound ceased. We took to our heels facing different directions. I can't even point out how I got back here. Labake screamed out, "What? God have mercy. So what happened to them?" "I don't know." Digi buried his face in his palm again and sniffed in between sobs. Labake contemplated, then soliloquized aloud. "This explains the treatment I received earlier." She redirected her gaze to Dejo. "So what do we do now?" Loud bangs on the door interrupted their discussion and heightened the panic in the room. Not until they heard a familiar voice shout from behind the door, "Dejo, open the door. It's me, Namdi." Dejo hastily unlocked the door. Namdi walked in company of Bola. They collapsed on the floor, breathing heavily. Labake handed them cups of chilled water. After having their fill, Namdi swallowed hard and shook his head vehemently. Kai, what happened today was a big blunder. He turned to face Labake while Dejo lowered his head again. "The king's palace is already aware of the incident. We hid a safe distance and saw the large crowd in front of the unseen eye. The High Chief ordered some FT-built guards to bring out our colleagues from the cottage. It was a numbing experience." We watched with horror as they brought out 8 stone-iced bodies and laid them on the ground. My heart skipped when there was no movement. I thought they were dead. Nosado stepped forward and checked their pulse. She confirmed that they are alive. They were moved to the king's palace and are being cared for. Labake blotted out, "Praise God." Dejo raised his head and heaved a sigh of relief. "So what do we do now?" Bola glanced round. "We will have to go to the palace and see the situation of things, then tender our sincere apology as well," Labake added. With mixed feelings, Namdi caught him. Hope they will not make us scapegoats and hand us over to the police or escalate to NYSC authorities. That is why we are going to plead for leniency, since we are aware that we heard they just chipped in. Heavy banging resumed on the door. A drop silence followed. Then they exchanged sharp glances. Miriam's frail outcry for help diffused the heated tension. Dejo, Dejo, open the door. Nnamdi unlocked the door and beheld the pale-faced Miriam. Without prior warning, Miriam collapsed into Nnamdi's thick arms. He swept her off the ground and laid her on Dejo's bed, while Labake sprinkled water on her face, then settled beside her to massage her forehead and neck with a wet towel. Miriam let out a loud sneeze and opened her eyes. Dejo rearranged the pillows facing the wall to support her back. Do you feel better now? Nnamdi inquired. Yes, I do, she nodded. Bola handed her a glass of water, which she emptied, then expelled a loud exhale. I didn't know the news of the incident had spread across like wildfire. I barely escaped being rough-handled by some youths who gave me a hot chase. Are you serious? Nnamdi interrupted. Miriam nodded again. If not for the timely intervention of Mama Ologi, which saved the day. She pleaded with the angry youths not to pass hasty judgments and punish the innocent before they finally yielded. I was with her for some time and eventually sneaked out through her back door. Jiboya's son walked me through an unfamiliar path. He turned back when we reached a safe distance. I ran non-stop till I got here. Panic-stricken Labake caught in. This is serious. Hope an angry mob will not attack our Lord Joe. God help us. Bola raised her hands in resignation. What about Kenneth and Hakim? Nnamdi raised concerns. Then followed sharp knocks. Dejo, it's me, Hakim. Open up. Dejo hurriedly unlocked the door and let in Hakim and Kenneth. They settled on the floor while their heartbeat raced non-stop. Kenneth swallowed hard and rubbed his face with both hands. Hakim and I watched from the hill adjacent Metu town as the crowd gathered discussing the incident. When we saw that the coast was clear, we took to our heels until we arrived here. Well, Labake intruded. I have an idea that will diffuse the tension. The corps members clustered round her. A total of 7 corps members filed into the king's palace, led by Labake. They wore a sober countenance. On sighting the king and his chiefs, they paid homage. Armed with a barrage of rendition, Labake broke the ice. She chanted theatrical praise and heaped accolades on His Majesty, so much so that the king, Metu VI, raised his royal fly whisk to acknowledge her. Labake took advantage of the king's sudden vitality to plead on behalf of the entire corps members. She went on her knees. Kábíyèsí, Ọba Láyélúwà, please tamper justice with mercy. The erring corps members filed into the palace, face down, led by Deji, who wore a disquiet countenance. They paid homage and pleaded for mercy. Ọba Metu thundered in his baritone voice. Today, you all have proven that beyond your youth, exuberance lies immense wisdom. For this reason, you are hereby pardoned. The chiefs and corps members chorused immediately. Kábíyèsí o, kádé pẹ́ lórí, kí bàtà pẹ́ lẹ́sẹ̀. He went a step further and untangled the web of mystery surrounding the unseen eye. According to history, our land was wealthy in gold, artifacts, farm produce, amongst other things. This gave us economic leverage over other kingdoms. We were the first point of call for business and investment opportunities. However, our opposing rival kingdoms formed alliance with the colonialists and spied our land. They capitalized on the festive period celebration, which forbade the shedding of blood. It typifies the saying that while men slept, the enemy sowed tares. The kingdom was invaded by colonialists at the wee hours of the night, when the land was defenseless. Many lives were lost, including the oldest son of the then Metu III. The colonialists ravaged the land and carted away most of the historical wealth that Metu Kingdom boasted of, leaving her a shadow of the old glory. The cottage now known as the Unseen Eye was a gift to Oba Metu II from the first set of white men who visited the land prior to the invasion of the colonialists. What was left of the treasures were gathered and taken to the cottage. The cottage was then laced with a spell by the chief priest to deter non-indigents from further thefts of the remaining historical treasures. From that day onward, the cottage was named the Unseen Eye. Over the years, there were attempts to steal the treasures, but the same fate befell them. Some were not so lucky who attempted the act at the wee hours of the night. Their lifeless bodies were discovered the following day. This is why you should always tread with caution when you get to the unfamiliar. Kábíyèsí o, what about indigents who entered the Unseen Eye to steal the treasures? Labake sought curiously. Indigents are bound by oath. Those who defy it face their consequences. The entire corps members hailed the king once more and pledged their allegiance to the community. As they left for the corpers' lodge, Bola tapped Deji. What did you see in there? Ha, Bola, my mouth no fit talk wetin I see o. Kamsin intruded. Those treasures are massive. Glittery gold sculptures and bronze artifacts that came alive. I've never seen anything like it in my entire life. Musa Cotton. They became living creatures. Kamsin raised his hands. I've learnt my lesson, though in a hard way. No more betting except for football premiership. Momentous laughter erupted from the corps members as they continued their work. Log on to the next episode for the concluding part of this captivating story.